Good morning, everyone that's on the call. Happy Sunday and first day of spring. We'll start out this morning and just ask if there are any questions or comments from last week, from yesterday. Any thoughts or comments before we get started today? All right, great. All right. So yesterday we ended the conversation and just trying to keep everything kind of on a continuum from where we started. We started talking about just being aware of our true identity and then the consequences or the results of not being aware, which is being unaware. And just to kind of a quick recap, we talked about just being able to have that self-discipline, to be self-aware. All those things connect us socially, and we talked about being flexible and a problem solver. But on the flip side of that, when you're unaware, you're basically denying the power and ability you have to do those things. And we operate from a sense of emotions, reaction, which tends to open us up for more errors like we talked about before. And one of the biggest statements we made yesterday was that we know ourselves better than anyone else. And you could, basically put on the front for anyone, but you can't really fool yourself. And so sort of statement was made, we cannot deny ourselves or lie to ourselves. We know what we need. The question becomes, are we going to be disciplined enough to give ourselves what we need? And so just picking up from there today, and we touched on a little bit yesterday, we began to touch on being able to use someone else's power. And I know that we've been really focusing on the internal aspect because it is up to us. Ultimately, you have to do it. It's on us ultimately to take responsibility for our own awareness level. You can be fed, you can be told the right things, you can be given the right advice, but ultimately it's our responsibility to take charge of our own individual awareness based on what we know. And a lot of our awareness prior to really going deeper and taking a deeper dive in this pursuit of truth, and a lot of that was shaped by religion early on, and just kind of honestly, just overall, from that aspect of the religion part, we just got a lot of bad advice. And so now that we're on this internal journey, if finding the true embedded self, there's a way that we could tap into the power of someone else. There's a way that we can connect with them, and that connection helps us. Basically, we talked about find our way home to our true self. And so I know we've been talking a lot of this, making this like an individual effort, and it is, but also remember, if you've got three people operating with the awareness and the understanding, and they know they are Elohim, and doing the same thing is a lot stronger. 30 doing the same thing is a lot more. So that, the more that awareness is understood, the greater that energy is for all of us. And so we touched on a little bit yesterday of you can really take advice from someone or seek counsel from someone, but you really have to be connected to that person for it to be sound and basically on the same page. Any questions that so far before we go on? And I'll explain that a little more. But once we understand how to do that, it becomes so much of an easier road, so to say. It's not going to be a totally easy, but it becomes easier for us to understand and operate who we are. And one of the questions, I guess, I'll throw it out here this morning is, how do we tap into someone else's power, their spiritual energy that they have? In any thoughts on that? How we would actually, if I'm in a situation where I'm trying to tap into what Ron has to offer or connect with it, for example, how do I do that?
Well, SP.
I'm sorry, I yield.
No, you can go ahead, Miss Evelyn.
I was going to ask, don't we do that anyway, unconsciously? Because if you got a bad vibe, I can feel that. And yeah, don't we do that anyway? That's my question.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to go back to with that is going back to the religious aspect of it, and then going back several weeks ago to sort of following a bad philosophy. Because think about how much advice or how much we've taken from other people who we weren't really connected with, and it's kind of led us down a road of maybe some errors, away from who we are awareness-wise. And so what I'm trying to, and you're right, we do that. We do that with people we trust and we feel comfortable with. But to really tap into that awareness of being Elohim and recognize that in someone across from you, like Kathy would say, being the mirror to someone else. There's some steps that we need to take to get there. And we look at this whole concept of the eighth sense and how we're operating from a more of an intuitive state and more of a state of being Elohim instead. For instance, we've gotten, just for example, from a religious standpoint, we were told, or the impression was made, as long as you do this, you tithe, you get baptized, you do all these things, and all of this will make life better for you. And then when things happen in life and we struggle a little bit, we've been doing these things or trying to be disciplined in those things. And the reality was we were trying to be disciplined in the wrong thing instead of being disciplined in the pursuit of finding out who we are. So just like little things like that can lead us down a path of where you're trying to be disciplined and aware, but it's not the self-awareness, but we're being disciplined around the wrong concepts, I guess. But you're right in the sense that we pull from people that we do trust, and we take that advice kind of naturally, like a parent would tell you something, and you say, okay, I appreciate it, and you kind of take that in. But there's been a philosophical difference based on what we know now versus what we were taught years ago and how we approach it. And so it's kind of like removing that external influence and just constantly like, okay, how do I do that from within, if that makes sense?
It does, but I think there are people that I don't know and I can tap into. I don't know that I know that they're dealing with something, don't know what the situation is, but I just know that something's not right with that individual. It's like even when you walk in a room, you can feel there's a different vibe, that something's not right, and you don't even know that person. So I think it goes past trusting someone, because you don't trust someone that you don't know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that may have more to do with your internal strength and intuition than the person that's giving off the vibe. So in that case, we do sense, okay, there's something wrong with someone, And then you from there, you know that that's not someone that you're going to tap into to try and pull from them to strengthen yourself. So it's sort of like, okay, yeah, this person's going through some things, and you may be more of a helper there as far as that, and not with them helping you. And so that's sort of the balancing act that we have to manage. But there's definitely a lot that we pull from other people, even if we don't know them. And that's why I kind of threw this question out there. How do we do it? What was one of the first things we think about when we're trying to pull from someone? And typically, we'll pull from someone when we're in a situation of we're up against the wall, and it's maybe feels overwhelming, and we need that person to kind of pull us back in line with our identity. It may be something that they've gone through before. We talk about a true testimony of someone, and sometimes testimonies aren't necessarily like what I tell you happened. I've seen you deal with it and move through it, move past it. And just, from the outside, you just wonder at some people, like, man, what kind of inner strength do they have to get beyond that, to move on from that? So talking more about that, and I got several good examples here, hopefully this morning, if that helps.
Thank you.
Yes, this is Barbara. I have a follow-up to what you just said about our having put more emphasis and discipline on following the religious kinds of things that we once did, i.e., tapping into what religion said about tithing and being a member of the church and baptized, and everything will be all right. And in that sense, we keep going back to the altar physically.
Correct.
And the question is, why do we keep going back to that physical altar if this was supposed to be part of the answer to our dealing with our circumstances and our challenges and our obstacles? And so the issue is, once we tap into ourselves, know who we are, become aware of who we are, then we don't have to keep going back to a physical altar to get that sense of connectedness and peace about certain things. We tap inside ourselves internally then, and are able, even in the midst of whatever is going on externally, whatever's got people excited, whatever's got people upset, whatever's got people scared, we can tap in internally to that internal, quote unquote, altar and find the peace that we need in the midst of all of that storminess, if that resonates.
Oh, it does. Exactly. I was thinking when you were saying that, yeah, that altar is internal. But no, exactly. And that's the thing that it's almost like a reminder. It's like we have the answer to the test, but we keep trying to search for the book to give us the answer to the test and the answers inside of us. We keep looking for an external solution. And I guess what I'm going at this morning, based on, just what you said, Barbara, is there are a lot of people that don't want to, I won't say necessarily think for themselves, but they want the answer from someone else. They want someone else to give them the answer or to fix their problem for them, or to just, I don't want to make a decision of it because I'm so afraid I'm going to make the wrong decision. Let me get that answer from Barbara, or let me ask, someone at work, because I just don't want to make this decision for myself. I'm bad at doing it, things like that. And that's where I'm, sort of going now to incorporate this along with everything we've been dealing with before, is that you get away from that line of thinking. But like you said, Barbara, by realizing that your altar is internal. And so long, religion's had us trying to find the answer by doing things externally and just going to someone, I'm gonna, bring my week's pain and my week's issues to altar call, and I'm gonna leave it there, and it's gonna be fixed. My knees been hurting. I've been on the knees all for an hour with this prayer, and I get up and I just left it there. But that's not the reality, and so much of that leaks into our everyday life, where whether it's at work, you're just gonna let a coworker fix that or deal with that, and so we have to be able to tap into the power that we perceive they have and tap into what's really there from a spiritual connection person who's legitimately walking the way that we want to walk, and understand, okay, I need to be able to do that for myself versus always projecting our problems on someone else and having them tell us, hey, this is what you need to do. Because once I tell you what I think your answer is, you're going to be applying your discipline to try and act on my advice. That makes sense. If you're in that boat, or someone who's relying on that exterior support and comfort, you're going to do your best. If I tell you that, yeah, you need to go here and do that, you're going to be disciplined. You're going to put all your discipline into trying to fix it that way. And what you said, Barbara, what I'm saying is that needs to be applied internally, and that's where solutions going to come from.
Hey, Ash. It's Ron. I agree with what's been said. I also think it's almost impossible to not share your energy. I mean, you've got to try real hard and really isolate yourself not to share that energy. And as Evelyn mentioned, even on the negative side, people pick up on it. So if your heart is truly to recognize that you're Elohim and you're moving in that direction, and your meditations are on love and forgiveness, it is impossible not to share that, not to connect. It just comes from you. You become the breath, whereas you're inhaling what is good, you're inhaling enlightenment, and you're exhaling what you're learning, that awareness. So as we become this, the meditation and the breathing is what we're sharing, and it's almost, again, hard not to do that. So that desire alone allows you to be shared and to share from others. At least that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, and one of the things, so I'm going to give us like the first thing that we have to do, and you're right, Ron. I mean, like it comes, and it comes after a level, like the proper way. Remember we talked about some people may need milk and not food, or we talked about following the right philosophy, not the wrong philosophy. And this is really on the road to all of us being aware we're Elohim. But the number one thing that we have to do first, and almost before I say this, we talked about the prodigal son yesterday and how he came back home. And this kind of applies to that too. The number one thing that we have to do first is be willing to listen, not only to what the person is telling us, but listen internally at what's coming towards us. In other words, we talked yesterday, like you can take advice from someone who is connected, who's connected with you based on the same fact that you're aware of you're both being Elohim. And that comes from us constantly feeding our mind already. We've already been and keep in mind, this is kind of an accumulation of everything we've talked about before. We've been feeding our mind. And I have someone here who, if Kathy or Barbara is telling me something, I know the connection, I know the communication that's gone forth for so long, all these years, that I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna listen. And everybody doesn't listen, but the number one thing we have to do is listen. And then based on what I've been feeding my mind internally from myself, I can really apply that, because it's gonna take that next step of okay, what Barbara said made sense. That is true. Now I've got to apply my own self-discipline to it. But the number one, the first step we have to do is listen internally, and then focus on what they said, because whether it comes from Barbara, Rev, Ron, Kathy, remember we go back to the beginning of whatever's been taught and told to us. At some point, we have to go back and recap that, and which is the second step on this, and completely understand it for ourselves so that it makes sense. Because just because we get the advice, it doesn't mean that we're able to apply it. So that's the first thing, is listen. And then based on what we fed ourselves, what we've learned over the years, what we've accumulated of our self-awareness, because Elohim is an evolving state, and someone may be ahead of you on the evolutionary scale of being Elohim or being awareness up there. They're operating at a higher level, and that's okay. But you take what they say, you go back, we internalize it because we listen and we've been feeding ourselves. But the second part of that is it has to be completely understood for us, for the individual person internally, to be able to add that discipline piece to it. Does that resonate or make sense on it?
Yeah, it does. It does. Yes.
It does.
Go ahead.
It does. The resurrection occurs with us when we are at the point where we can recover the truth. And part of what I hear you saying is we each individually have to be at that point where what we hear externally is also filtered through what's internal on our path toward responding as Elohim responds, is filtered internally. And once we understand it, that's when we are at the point where we cover the truth of not only what the situation is, but the truth of the fact that we are walking not physically, but walking or experiencing being the Elohim that we are.
Yes. I mean, and the reality is, I found this out, I'm sure other people found this out for yourself as an individual. At some point, we get stuck. We get stuck, you know, on the evolution, however you want to look at it. You know, you're on the right road, but at some point, we all get stuck, and it's just things that life come, and we just get stuck at a point, and you're trying to, you know, align everything. You're trying to problem solve, and that's when what you just described, already with the meditation, going back and you know we've all been in a place where we've had to kind of forgive yourself. You beat yourself up over a mistake. Something didn't quite turn out right, and we go back and we just try to look at things from the outside. Okay, what if I had done this better, or what if I had fixed this, or if I had went ahead and paid more. You know, we all have made some sort of mistake where we kind of okay, we try to fix it, but really the answer goes back. Okay, what was my vibe internally? What did I do to get myself to this place of being stuck? And that's where the nudging or the encouragement from someone else who has already communicated and committed and connected with us, it's so much easier to take that advice from them. And then the second issue that we have, along with not listening, is we don't like to share. So then you have to share, because that communication has to be, sort of two-way in order for us to take this. It's almost like, if, and I don't know, some people claim to be like, they make the best pork shoulder in the world. They smoking a pork shoulder, or even a mechanic. But somebody's really good at just, they've got a special recipe for this shoulder, and we taste it, and it's like, man, that is good. I want to do that for myself. And they give you the steps and the ingredients and how to do it, all the directions in the world. We go back home and we want to just make this shoulder by ourselves the way that we just tasted it, and you follow all those steps. You do it exactly like that person has instructed us, and it turns out pretty good. I guess that's kind of a physical example of what I'm talking about. But one, we trusted that person's advice because we tasted the results of what they prepared already. We're like, okay, yeah, this is good, and we know it is. So from a spiritual perspective, when we get that taste of someone and we know the connection is real, we know that we're on the same walk. We know that this person is walking, living Elohim, and we see that that mirror, as Kathy says. Sometimes we see that, so it's easier for us to go back, and that's the external advice, but we're still taking it back and internalizing, so we can get a similar result, and that result's always going to be that result for us, but it's not necessarily what we get in the end, but it's just starting to move us from that place of being stuck, and we're moving forward in that regard. If that makes sense, it's a good example.
Yes, it's Ron. I just want to make sure I understand. Can you go over being stuck again? I'm not sure I got that part.
Yeah, so we're on a journey. You're on the path. You understand your Elohim, and we know it's like a constant. You're constantly moving forward and closer to becoming more and more godlike. And for whatever a challenge comes up, and you're kind of stuck in that place, almost like we talked about. Like it could be an aspect of not being able to forgive as easy as, say, someone else that is willing to let something go easier, and you're kind of stuck in that place of, man, my resolve and my stubbornness keeps me a little closer to holding on to something instead of forgiving. I'm just using forgiveness as an aspect. Well, Kathy comes along and gives you a month lesson on forgiveness, and we go deeper into it. Talks about why forgiveness is so important, and how it kind of like ultimately comes back to us. If we don't forgive, then we're holding ourselves back, and you get that. And that month lesson allows you to move forward from that place of being stuck or held back from being more forgiving, and that concept of forgiveness and ultimately love, like I think she incorporated with it. So just using that as an example where, okay, you're back on the path of moving forward because you've gotten beyond that point of letting forgiveness be a deterrent for you moving forward. And so that was someone telling you something or giving you the advice from an external standpoint, but you still had to take those lessons on forgiveness and go back in within Ron and apply them and use the disciplines and meditate on them so that you completely understood it to the best of your ability. Okay, now that forgiveness aspect is not a roadblock for you. You're able to keep plugging forward because someone externally who was connected gave you the advice of Elohim. It gave you the spiritual aspect of it, and you knew it was real, and you just had to take it back for yourself. And once you went back into your own place, you got to a place of complete understanding. And so now you weren't stuck on that anymore. You were able to move forward. I guess I was trying to a long-winded way of explaining it.
Thank you. That's a great example. I appreciate that. I got you now.
Good morning, Ash. This is Kathy. May I add one more example to that? Because that was a great example, but this is a real-life conversation that I had with someone the other day, one of my friends. And I think sometimes as teachers, when we're teaching and teaching how you are Elohim and recognizing what we have the ability and the power to do, as we're teaching our students and those that are listening, we know they're internalizing it because they trust what we're teaching, but we don't always see how they get stuck. And I was speaking with one of my friends last week, and she was explaining to me, she said, I've been going through some things. I had a challenge that came my way, and I've always been able to call you, and we've talked through everything. And she said, and I know what you've been telling me, and I believe everything that you were telling me, but then you had surgery, and I didn't want to bother you. And so therefore, she told herself that she couldn't call me, which it would have been fine to call. But in that moment, she made the decision that, you know what, I am going to do what I have been taught to do in this situation. And when we were talking the other day, now my surgery was way back in December, the power and the strength that I heard in her and the confidence, she had been stuck. And I didn't even realize as teachers, when we're teaching, sometimes you get stuck because you're thinking, well, I think the teachers are getting this, but and I know it's real, but I don't see how I can do this on my own. And when put in that position of needing to do it on her own, she not only did it, she's continuing to do it. She's got the confidence, the power, the strength to continue to deal with what she's facing. And I can tell she's going to overcome this. She's already done it. She just doesn't know it yet. And so basically, that's another way of being stuck. We are giving this information, and as a result of that, like you said, you've got to make the decision when, because we put it in the macro. That's getting that power from someone else, even the interactions that we have day to day around each other, like Evelyn was describing. Yes, I pick up on your energy. Yes, I draw from you, and it be it negative and or if it's something positive. But in that drawing, like you've been saying this morning, what am I going to do with that? And then when I am put in that position where now I have to do it on my own, I have to figure out, do I really believe that I can do this? And when we get there and you say, okay, what have I got to lose? I've got to try this. I've got to put into action what I've been taught. That's the way we get to a point of recognizing that I don't have to stay stuck, because maybe you don't sometimes even realize that you're stuck because you're relying on someone to always be there to help you. And it's not that people won't be there to help you, but at some point, like you've been saying this morning, you have an aha moment when you realize, you know what, I really can help myself. And I just wanted to share that because it's so ironic that you're talking about this morning, because we just had this conversation last week, and I was so excited to hear the strength and the power from the recognizing that, you know what, I got this, I can do this. And I just wanted to share that this morning. So thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate it, because that's exactly the couple of aspects we talked about. Was one, she was always willing to share with you, and if we're not willing to share the fact that we're stuck, or vice versa, then we stay in that place a little longer, and then you put her in a situation where she, independent of you, sounds like she was always feeding her mind and listening, and that listening from feeding her mind and the internal portion of what you've told her, how she internalized it. And then she had to get to the point of a complete understanding of all the things you've told her. And so that's the thing that I was really like just kind of shown this morning. I literally just wrote these steps down because, and then you add the communication of it. That's how we move forward, and those are the things that we were never able to express in a religious setting. It was just kind of like when you're told something and it goes in the air, but we're not able to feed ourselves and like completely understand it so we can get to the point of listening. And that's the disadvantage of being in that mindset. And, you know, in the corporate world, we call it drinking from a fire hose. Like, it's just, okay, you're telling me a bunch of stuff, but I can't really listen to it right now. But I appreciate it, Kathy. That definitely lines up with everything we've been talking about so far.
Thank you, because it made me stop and think about there is going to, like Barbara said, the internal altar, but there is a readiness. When are you ready to look inside yourself and say, I know I can do it? So that's what that made me aware of too. You just got to be ready. And when you're ready, you'll tap into it.
Yeah. And that's where it goes back. That's where it always falls on us. I mean, like, you can get the best advice in the world from the most, I mean, and it's coming from a place of where someone really wants you to get it, but until we internalize it, until we follow it and really add that discipline aspect of regulating the emotional parts and separating it and integrating all these senses so it flows a lot easier for us. And that's what this whole concept of eighth sense, it just makes all these things flow easier for us, and it just kind of puts them in their space so that we can use it and tap into this thing internally. It just makes it all flow a lot better for us. And we talk about just being in rhythm and being able to flow and being able to adjust to different things, because we're in control of it more. You understand who you are. It's just so much easier to walk in that awareness and understanding when we're incorporating all these things with we're talking about this eighth sense concept. But thank you. Any other questions or comments on it?
I have another one. This is Evelyn. The senses that we have, are they given to us to help each other get back to beginning? Has it been given to us so we could connect, have that one mind, so we all can get back to beginning? Is that? Yeah.
Yes. Yes, we're born with them. And if you want to look at it from this aspect, like from being on milk to solid food, from baby to the adult that's eating solid food, like the scripture we talked about weeks, because the sense of, and we're talking about even the 10 utterances, like all those things combine to help us understand who we are and how to deal with things. And the physical sense, the hearing, the seeing, and even the physical aspect of the eighth sense, these are things that take place within us from a physical standpoint, and they manifest. And if we don't incorporate the spiritual aspect, then we get really emotional, we get overwhelmed, we give ourselves anxiety. So this is all to help us. It's like a breadcrumb. We keep saying a trail to go back home, to be embedded. We talk about the prodigal son, like to be broken down and understand who you are. And then once you understand who you are, it doesn't stop then, because now you have to go on a journey of how to apply and walk through life day in and day out based on who you are, balancing the different natures, balancing the different challenges that come. We said yesterday that no matter what we do, life's going to keep coming at us, and we're going to have to always make decisions and problem solve and do things. But if we're doing it based on our identity and not necessarily external influences, that answers the question that you were talking about. Then it just it gets us back to who we are quicker, and we're always evolving. Like I said, there's always levels of evolving to to being more godlike. But I hope that answered. Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thank you.
Yeah. And I even have an example, like, like mechanics. They, we do this all the time. If someone's mechanically inclined, they can tell you how to fix something without actually being there, because in their mind, they know each step and they can tell it to you. That's why sometimes you get someone over the phone and they could just kind of detect what's going on with your, whatever you're calling help desk for. They can detect what's going on, and they know they can walk you through it step by step. And then eventually you internalize that. And if that problem comes up again, especially on a computer, you know what to do step by step to remedy it, to fix it. Because what they've told you, you've gone back and internalized it, and you completely understand what's going on. And the thing that was imposed on us from a religious standpoint, just going back to that, was what we were told in church. We never truly understood how to go back, and we never, apply it. We never really completely understood how to internalize it, because we were never told to look internally. We were told that these things are going to be fixed from the outside. You just pray and put it out there, and then it's going to all work out for you. And we weren't given the instructions of how to ignite, our internal power, so to say. And then all the things that happen, you don't, in that case, you don't feed your mind. You don't go back as an individual to really be able to listen and discern and do things in the way you should. And we miss a lot of signs, because when, from that intuition standpoint, when you have a heightened intuition, you're just more aware of things. You don't miss those signs. And it's, we can always, the easiest thing is to go back and use examples of driving every day. And when you're locked in and driving, a detour is coming up, and you're ready and you're prepared to deal with it. But when we're not locked in and aware, we begin making decisions that aren't necessarily based on who we are or the best information, or on things that we completely understand and line up with. And I guess that's the best way to look at it. Would you rather make a decision on something you think you kind of know a little bit about, or on something that you completely understand? And that's what the difference of being and understanding where Elohim is, being aware of that, is that you're doing it from something you completely understand versus making a decision on something you think you know, or you heard about a little about. A lot of people walk through life making decisions on something they don't truly understand, but just what they've seen the trend or others do, or what they were told was the best option. And it's not the same for everyone, but that's what happens. And so I guess that's kind of an example that I can put out there as far as the walk goes too. But any other questions on that before I step forward a little bit? Now, the other aspect of tapping into someone's power spiritually when needed, or being tapped into, is being judgment free as well. And that could be something else that gets us stuck at a certain point, because we can't move past the judgment aspect, or how something looks, or what we think it should be like. And so when we're definitely connecting and communicating with someone, it's based on judgment free, and that connection is based on who they are, what they are, and not necessarily a judgment of what they're doing. Because we, that, like I said, there are multiple things that can get us stuck when we're ready to move forward. Like Ron said, and the example Kathy said earlier, we, the individual Elohim, will be able to move it forward. And if judgment is something that's got you stuck or got us to the point of where we're questioning something based on a judgment, then that's something that you have to overcome as an individual as well. And so that's always, I don't know how many times you can say, well, I'm not taking advice from so-and-so. I mean, look what happened to them 4 years ago. Or, I don't know about that. So those things mean that kind of comment means you're not looking at it from the lens of Elohim. We're looking at it from earthly judgment realm, because there again, you got to go back, and if you're not even willing to hear and listen to that to even internalize it, you could be stuck in some place that someone's able to offer you some of their power, some of their energy to move you beyond, but you're maybe stuck for a different reason of judgment. And so that's just another example of that, where the messenger comes in many forms, and we all receive messages. It's just a matter of what we do with it. Are you going to take it back? Are you going to internalize it? Are you going to meditate on it? Have you fed yourself enough to go back and say, okay, this was the proper sign. This is what I needed. I need to take this back. I need to completely understand it and move forward. But you can't do that if you're looking at it from the lens of judgment, if that makes sense.
As I'm listening to you, this is Evelyn again, I think for the last time today, not sure, but anyway.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
While you're talking, I see a set of twins. It's like they always work from that the eighth sense, because they can tap into each other's mind, and they know when something's not right or if something's good. Does that make sense what I'm saying? And while you were talking, that's what I saw. We're to operate like twins, just tap into that for the good, not the bad, for the good. Because I think when we do it for the bad, it doesn't make sense. But when we're operating together for the good, we are in tune, we are in rhythm with that other twin. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you're saying from the twin standpoint. But if I give you good advice too, or if I give you bad advice, when you go back to think about it internally and to enter that into your space of meditation, you will also know that that's not based on what you've been feeding yourself and based on feeding your mind and all the concepts we've talked about in the past and really listening. You may not even take bad advice back once you get to that level of awareness, because you know that, hey, you know what, that's not Elohim. You know it. Like you said before, you know good, you know bad. But sometimes when it gets complicated based on the message sounding close to being right. And that's why we have to go back and always kind of do it eternally, do it internally. If you completely understand it, you'll see the ins and outs of it. And it's going back even to, we've all been approached by financial advisors, things of someone's telling you, hey, you work and do this. And you go back and look at it. And if a person's totally content with where their situation is in that aspect financially, it doesn't take them long to say, well, you know what? You're telling me I may miss the boat on this, but I'm willing to miss that boat because I'm content. I understand who I am. That's an easy remedy. But if it's something that's a little closer that you're contemplating, the thoughts that you give it and how you internalize it, that could be close to a decision that you make if you don't make it with complete understanding, you may make it and it may not be the best for you. So the closer we are to Elohim, whether it's our twin, you will take advice from that twin quicker based on the connection, for sure. But also, it has to be something you feel inside of you and you completely understand for yourself as well. And that communication, that understanding helps you move forward. And hopefully I was a good example of it. But a twin, someone you're connected with, that connection makes it a lot easier because you do feel things quicker, you do sense things quicker. But you're still two individuals that are trying to be aware of the highest form of Elohim, and get closer and closer to that's embedded in each individual. And as long as they're giving you the advice and that's the motivation behind it, you can take that back and internalize it a lot easier than you can something that's a little controversial, something that's a little close to, to a different philosophy that you're trying to sort out. And we talked yesterday about removing the time aspects of things. The worst thing we can do is put ourselves in a time constraint or a timeline to where we're making a decision based on that. Our decision should always be based on who we are first and what am I feeling internally about it, if that makes sense.
Yes, I hear you.
For those, yesterday we talked about just how much pressure we can put on ourselves from creating a time constraint and putting things that we want to get done in a certain period of time and not allowing ourselves really to do it in the proper order. I remember, and when you're a kid, especially when you're younger, I remember having at that time going to get my own switch to be spanked or whatever sometimes. And I can remember sitting back after the spanking and it's like thinking to myself, okay, what did you do wrong? And, why was it necessary for me to do that? That wasn't a good decision. Fast forward, now when I look back at that self-reflection, I realize that, even at a young age, we start tapping into that and we start internalizing things. And so if I was able to listen from the lesson from that discipline and internalize it at a young age, then now it's evolved where like it doesn't take a spanking or something like that to help us go back and internalize it. We can just do it by listening and taking it back and completely understanding and moving from a point of being stuck. And one other aspect that you touched on, Evelyn, if I don't know if someone else had a comment, was the communication part of it, which is so key. How can you tap into someone if you're never in communication with them? And that's real world examples. Like we have people that we trust more so than others. We have people that you go to for certain issues, certain challenges. And some of that could be history and memory. Some of that could just be I'm more willing to share what's going on with someone else who I've just got a better connection with. I'm more willing to share that with that person. And that's sort of the overall aspect we're talking about now, is that what separates that person from someone else who also would have your best intentions at heart is the connection and the communication that's been there over time. And you go back and your memory, you think back your timeline, like this person's always been there for me and they've always given me the proper advice, because we, that connection, that like-mindedness, that awareness of who they are identity-wise, it goes back to a lot longer than someone who you just recently connected with. So there's a lot of different things that are there to unpack there. But really and truly, the number one thing that gets us stuck are things that come from the outside, and we allow those things in to kind of clog up the thinking, so to say, and you unclog the thinking by going back first to identity. Who am I? And then when you operate from who you are, these concepts then start to take place. They start to line up for you, because when you know who you are, there's a process for problem solving then. And as long as we try to problem solve based on who we are and not necessarily what the problem is and how we think it's going to affect us, if we operate from who we are, then we follow that process, those steps of going to an internal altar versus an external altar, listening and applying what we've been told. Like Kathy said, her friend that relied on her when she was down with the surgery didn't want to bother her, but she's fed her mind so much she was able to listen and completely understand it. And that's what kind of moves us forward. And at the end of the day, it just goes back to what we were talking about yesterday and started with today. We got to take responsibility for applying that discipline to ourselves to give us what we need. And sometimes we're not always willing to do that because of how it looks or how it may affect us. And that's why you got to remove all those things and do it based on who we are and based on what you're hearing and feeling internally. And that awareness level just keeps growing, it keeps evolving, and we get closer and closer. That makes sense. Yeah?
It does, but I can't help anybody till I get rid of my baggage. Does that make sense? I can't help someone move forward until I get rid of the baggage that I have. Am I right on that?
Well, in a way you are. It depends, because, remember a couple of weeks ago, we can multitask, and that was one of the things I think that we, because if we're always constantly willing to get perfect before we can help someone, or remove things from our lives before we can help someone, then we'll never be able, so I think you can do both. I think you can be going through something on your own, but because of who you are, you can still help people while you're going through what you're going through, because it all starts within you. All you're doing is putting things in order for yourself. But if I can help someone while I'm doing that, you're going to be able to do it. So we can do things for other people and help others based on doing it on who we are and all the concepts that we talked about before. So you don't have to be in an ideal situation with all of your things in line before you help someone. You can do both. And if nothing else, that ability to kind of like pull it together internally will help you move forward in what you're dealing with anyway. But we can do both at the same time.
Okay.
Evelyn. Hey, good morning. This is Audrey. Your question just made me think about what we talked about when we talked about Elijah in the age of Aquarius. So even though Elijah was having a really rough time because he had to leave his home because Jezebel was after him, and he had other worries and other situations. And even though he was going through all that stuff, he still was able to do what it was that the Creator wanted him to do, even though he had doubts still. But he was able to do what the Creator wanted him to do, and in effect, bring about, he became the water bearer, bringing in the age of Aquarius in that situation. So I agree with S. We can have our own doubts and our own struggles and our own situations going on. But if we can see clear, sometimes we can see others' situations more clearly than we see our own. And if we can help that person, then we are also helping ourselves become a little more clear about who we are and what we are. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you. I hear you.
Oh, thank you, Audrey. That does make sense, and it's evident we can, and it's almost like I think we used an example yesterday too. It always goes back to not forgetting our identity. The first step of just understanding who you are and the power you have. It's kind of like, I think I used the example yesterday of the old Snickers commercial when the person is like total opposite of who they are. They're there like in a wild state, opposite of their character, and then it's like they say you're hungry, it's like you'll be better, eat a Snicker, and they bite the Snicker and they turn back into who they are. So sometimes with identity, it's just we have to be reminded of that awareness, who we are, and it kind of puts you back in the standpoint of, okay, this is how I work through the problems no matter what. It starts with identifying who I am and seeking the answer to begin within me, and then going back out. And it's sort of like sometimes we step back from things, we look at it, and I don't know if anybody's ever been in an escape room, but these escape rooms make you like the answer sometimes in front of your face, but you have to kind of like step back and breathe and put things in order, and you say, okay, this is what I need to do. So at times, sometimes we may need to go back to the Snicker bar and just remind ourselves who we are, for lack of a better term, and then function and do everything based on that. And like Audrey said, it doesn't matter, our world could be crumbling, but you still see the signs, you still have the ability to help someone else. And when you're doing that, I almost feel guaranteed that it allows you to go back and understand who you are, and it helps your own situation. And you didn't do it because of being motivated to fix your situation. You did it because of the connection and what you saw, and you knew at that particular time and place you were who you needed to be for that person or that situation at that time. And it just kind of allows you to sink back into some sort of rhythm, because that's what you were describing, Evelyn. Basically, you are becoming who you need to be for that person at that particular time. And you learn that, okay, over time, I can interject and do what I need to do for that person, because my intuition tells me, and my connection says it's time for me to fix this situation for that person too. And that's that awareness that we've been talking about.
You're right. Thank you for making me mindful of that, because that does happen a lot. So thank you both.
Oh, no, you're welcome. Thank you for the question.
ST, and good morning, good evening, everyone. One of the techniques that I do if I'm trying to get to draw off another person's energy, especially if I view them as top shelf, I try to share an experience with them. Take them out to eat, have a conversation with them, even an argument. I mean the things that I say in the discussion, but just to have some kind of interaction with them that I can draw off of their energy. And it's been kind of beneficial to me. Everyone that's in my camp, and when I say my camp, I'm not saying my in terms of ownership. The people that I roll with, I can order for them. If I'm at a restaurant, hey, quick, just order me something. I can order for their spouse because I have some kind of experience with them. So in tapping to other people's energy, my suggestion is look at the camp who you roll with. If you got someone in your camp that's an excellent number cruncher, share an experience with him or her. Take them out to eat. They got on a nice wardrobe. They got on some nice fragrance. Hey, you look good today. You smell good. Their energy should rub off on you. If you're dealing with someone that's in your circle and everything they touch turn to gold, and you want to be able to touch things that turn to gold like they do, just share an experience with that individual. You can't share an experience with an individual when you're relying on them once your back get on that wall. Have the experience with them before your back get on the wall. Then you can rely on that. And in conclusion, I don't hang around Roy Pinckney that much, but I deal with him. And I got a grill, yet I don't have a enclosed garage. So I was like, once I got the grill, I said, man, I'm hustling backwards. What am I going to do? The first thing I said was, what would Roy Pinckney do? So I went and bought a container. So by engaging Roy, starting fights with Roy, his good energy rubs off on me. That's it.
George, as you were thinking, I thought of something we brought up yesterday. And for the most part, we should only take advice from people we're connected with. And I say like this, we have a better chance of understanding and knowing each other on this call than someone who's never spoke to us before. And so I feel like I have a better understanding of George than someone flying in from Germany meeting you for the first time. And just based on connection, history, and all these things. But also just look at him from an advice standpoint. We talked about yesterday how companies are beginning to move away from consulting firms because they realize their best advice can come from within. Meaning like they were paying all of these consulting firms millions of dollars who didn't understand their industry to come in and look at what they were doing from the outside to help them become unstuck from where they were. And so they were bringing these consulting companies do all these projects and look at it from the outside and then make a recommendation on what they needed to change to move forward to be more efficient or for things to flow better and for things to work better. When the reality, what they started finding out is, hey, I've got 10 employees who've been here 10 years. They've been doing this every day. They've worked at different departments in this company. They understand how we flow. And I've ignored the advice and I've not listened to what they were trying to share and communicate with me for all these years. And I'm bringing in this outside person, i.e. compare it to religion, whatever you want to tell me how to move forward, when I've had all these people inside all these years who've touched and they're familiar with everything, who I should actually go to first. And so more companies, even in that scheme, are starting to realize that, hey, we've got all these inside people that can really help us. We need to develop our internal protocol fix things from within before trying to bring in an external consultant to tell us how to be a better me. And so even from that aspect of it, George, Roy knows you, you know Roy, so that communication is already there. So we always have to start fixing our issues and solving things inside first, because we get the better answer, we get the quicker response, because these are people who are interacting or touching things every day versus always, okay, it's time to bring in somebody from the outside. And so I thought that was a good comparison analogy, but we talked about it a little bit yesterday about how now, even in corporate America and different companies, they're realizing the importance of, hey, we need to talk to our people inside, and that's going to make it better a lot faster than we do need to bring in someone from the outside to evaluate what we're doing, and we may not get the right advice that applies to us. So I hope that makes sense. Any other questions or comments on that? So I will just kind of recapping and going back to where we were today. Just for thought, just remember that we know ourselves better than anyone else. We know what we need. We really do, as far as the discipline aspect of it. We just need to center ourselves and listen to bring that in. But it always comes down to, are we willing to apply the discipline to ourselves once we get the information? And then we have to constantly feed our minds, which I think we do every day as this group, but watch for the signs and listen. And when we hear stuff, we know we completely understand it because we take it back. We internalize it. We recap it. We rethink it. We question. We raise the questions to get answers so we can completely understand. That's always been our process here on this call and as a group in pursuit of truth. The communication, like you said earlier, George and Barbara as well, and Audrey, the willingness to share. Kathy gave an example of that too. And then with that sharing, be judgment free. So those are all the things, I guess, in concept today, that when I ask the question, how do we tap into someone else's power and energy? Those are all the things that kind of have to take place for us to do it and do it properly. And no matter what we hear, whether it's from pastor, the teachers, whatever, we take it back and we internalize it and we listen to it. And if it's not something you can completely understand and apply your discipline to based on I'm Elohim, then you have to take a second look at it, and probably it's not the right move. And so our problem solving ability always starts from within and who we are. Any other questions, comments? That's really all I have today. If anyone's got anything else to say or add, or any questions.
Hey, go ahead,
Charles. Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
I was getting ready to say that when you can't answer that person's question and you don't know how to help that person, always, like George said, have a connection with someone else that you can, turn them to. Wow.
Yeah, and I was just reminded of the comment, I am because we are, and that's that connection. That's how it's all formed. And when we talk about being one entity, one group, one energy, it's the equivalent of all of us being aware of who we are and operating in sync and in rhythm based on who we are, that identity. Was someone else going to say something to you after Charles?
Yeah, I was trying to think of a way to say this, I guess, but I was going to use the example of motherhood, and going through the steps as you go through each day and each trimester, and you're feeling the baby inside of you, and you're growing to be one, and the bond that a mom has for a baby, there's nothing like it, and there's nothing that kind of compares to that. And what we're describing here and saying is your desire to be Elohim and become completely aware of self. That's a movement that has to be a desire or something that you just, once you start seeing the development and going through the steps of it and feeling the differences as you were, all the things that we've described, and you can almost see the senses, getting to the sense is almost being like steps in that direction, going through and recognizing those things, and you're growing out of the individual you into the bonded you that not only is physical, but you see the spiritual side, and you Elohim becomes something that's not external, but becomes internal. And once you kind of swallow that, once you see it and you feel it, you're in a flow and you're moving in that direction. So those are the things I see that you're talking about. And I guess I just trying to think of an example of it. Once you're there, once you get that feeling, that there's, like Jesus said, are you going to leave me too, or what? Where are you going? It's what Peter said, nothing to go back to. So I see that, and although you have those episodes where we do become stuck, and we still don't have the desire to keep going. So those things, those moments that you are stuck are just episodes to make you stronger and make you more aware of who you are and appreciate your desire to reach your goals. So yeah, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate the lesson, and I see how this all ties together with everything we've talked about in the past.
No, I appreciate it, Ron. I mean, going back to knowing who we are, and just I always try to equate things real world and how we, this is like medicine. If you got a headache, you can take a Tylenol. That's something that you're taking from externally to get rid of your headache. Stomach ache, whatever, pains, leave, and all these things that we do. But when you start looking at trying to apply that same concept to us spiritually, when you stress, we overwhelmed, we got emotional pain, we're going through sorrow, you can probably give yourself something to take your edge off. But there's nothing really from the outside that's going to calm the stress, the emotions, feeling overwhelmed. It's that stuff comes from that's what starts from. It comes from the inside. Calming that mind first, slowing down slowing down the heart rate of, the excitement of being caught off guard or whatever. All those things, when you start looking at it, they come from within. And sometimes the reason we fix them so easy from within is because we created the problem from sort of within, based on just, we bring our own anxiety to us. So when you start talking about balancing these things out and day in and day out, those are the things that always start back with, who am I? And you just you fix them that way, you problem solve that way. And a lot of the senses that we had before, understanding this A sense and how to really integrate and merge them all together to move beyond. A lot of our senses were solely based on our internal organs and how they made us feel, nervous stomach, sitting to the bathroom, elevated heart rate, you get a temperature. So you move beyond those things because now you're at the point of the awareness where none of that matters. It's just all about who you are and some of these other challenges that we face and things we get stuck on. It starts from within first. So I appreciate that, Ron.
Thank you, Ash.
Good afternoon. This is Mary. I have ST, if you would say a little bit more about not taking advice from people you're not connected with, because and the reason for that is that you can get some good advice from people you don't know. It depends on, if it resonates, whether it suits you at the time. I remember being in drugs and alcohol, and I would get talking to some of the patients, and they would give me good advice. I didn't have a relationship with them, but what they said resonated and made sense. I also think about, I didn't know you guys on this phone, still don't know you personally, but what you say resonates with me, and that's how I was able to form a connection. I also can see reading books, and it said, okay, this resonates with me, this doesn't, so I know what to pick and choose. So when you say not take advice from people you're not connected with, help me to understand where you're coming from, please. Thanks.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. That's a good question. And really, that resonation part, that's you internalizing it. When I say don't take advice from people we're not connected with, it's more along the lines based on, if you are focused on who you are, which, being Elohim, being close to God-like, when you're taking advice from someone who's trying to be the opposite of Elohim or is not operating that way, I just meant don't take advice in that regard from that person. But at the same time, back to what Evelyn's question was, we do get good advice from people all the time. And sometimes it's still not based on who we are. It's based on more of a philosophy, and those philosophies could be close initially. So when you're taking the advice from someone who's connected, who's trying to constantly remind themselves that they're Elohim too, and they're operating that way, it's an easier place to take the advice from. But the number one thing I want to emphasize, what you said earlier, is that no matter where you get the advice from, you have to take it back for yourself after listening to it. And because based on what you fed your mind and what you've been doing all along, you can take it back and internalize it. And when you get to the point of completely understanding how to apply it, it's yours then. So yeah, that's what I meant. Like, if I'm going north and somebody's going south, and I'm trying to get directions based on what's ahead of me headed north, I'm probably not going to take advice from that person that's heading south. But if there's someone else heading north alongside me or just ahead of me or even behind me that we're heading in the same direction, I want to be able to tap into what that person is thinking or what they know about that's in front of me or ahead of me. And so I was more applying it more towards a relationship and the connection of just being advised to someone who's not headed in the same direction, because it's just difficult to. It takes you longer to internalize that because it's coming from the opposite place. But if you're taking advice from someone you're connected with, you can go back and ponder it and apply that and see if, okay, that works. And I can remember, and I don't want to get a long-winded answer, like I can remember a time where people would, Oprah would have her show on at 4, and there'd be another show on after that. And for a lot of our time in life, that period of time, people took advice from those shows, all the self-help things that they were told were self-help, and they were trying, or they would buy a product that they saw on the show that worked well, or they would buy a book that was always like an author that came on, like, oh man, I'm going to read this author's book, and because it was on Oprah's show and it was a great insight. And some of the things help, but nothing can be applied until we operate based on who we are. And that's going to kind of level off the advice we get from anybody, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so much. I was like that with Dr. Oz. When he first came on TV, I was excited. He said how you eat and the diet programs. And then the next day he would contradict it and say how bad it was. I said, man, I'm not listening to you. So I stopped watching him. So thank you. I feel a lot better now. It resonates. I'm more clearer and comfortable. Thank you so much for answering my question.
No, that's great. And I got a real life example with Dr. Oz. And in the previous job, I was helping someone who was they had to take they had Hep C, and there were some drugs that come out that can cure Hep C and reduce it in your body. And this person was a religious Dr. Oz follower, and they were like, well, Dr. Oz always told them that I can help my liver by taking the St. John's wort and milk thistle. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling them the opposite, like, no, if you take this Hep C drug, you're going to have to get off that stuff. And they're telling us that, hey, Dr. Oz was saying this, and the milk thistle and St. John's wort, and I'm telling you, you still got Hep C after taking all that stuff. If you take this drug, you're going to have to get off of it. It's a contraindication. And I don't know whatever happened, but I know that person never came back to us because they thought they just like, oh no, Dr. Oz told me milk thistle and St. John's wort was good for me. And in that moment, you know, you kind of have to throw your hands up. But that's just real life things that I'd faced before. But in just trying to compare that, I was giving them the best example for based on what they wanted to do. If they want to take this medication, if they didn't want to take it, then that was fine. They could keep taking the milk thistle and St. John's wort. But we had to give them the best advice for that situation. Now, if that person went back, did their own research and followed up to what we were telling them and completely understood it, they would have made that decision based on that. But so that's just an example of that. So thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, I think you know the answer, the question about you can sit down and talk to a child, and that child can say something that resonates with you, and you stop and pause and say, that makes sense. Or just like, you know, you can step into a different church and you walk out and say, well, I came because I promised a family member I'd come here, but I really shouldn't have come. I didn't get much from this. So, I mean, that meditation that we started talking about initially, And the memory part, the memory reminds you of what your rhythms feel like, and you know when you have them and when you don't. You know when something doesn't set right with you. And like I say, you never grow out of the feeling that I cannot take advice from anybody, or there's not everybody can help you, is what I'm trying to say, or everybody can give you you know, some wisdom at some point or another, but use what is in you based on your experiences and what you know truth to be, to see if that's something that that sets right with you. It may sound good, and it may even be good advice for someone else, but it may not be what you need. And so that's kind of what I rely on, just going home this weekend and running into an old friend who's very religious and very sincere about what she believes in. But, you know, you just listen, and I didn't try to contradict or say anything to her about what she was saying. I didn't agree with it, but I didn't feel the need to say anything bad or try to correct her either. So you just kind of listen and you move on. But you just trust what you know is there internally, and knowing who you are. So.
No, that's perfect. I mean, like, because everybody's got a different perspective. We're going to see something different in some regards at some place, because we're looking at it through two different lenses. And this is a true story. Funny, like, if imagine somebody's been telling you all your life, you know, some people like just don't match up. My wife in particular, they just don't see color in the same way. And it's like, you know, trying to match things or compare things is one thing. But then just imagine this, Ron, if somebody's been helping you match colors all your life, and then you find out after knowing them for 15 years that they were colorblind. So you were looking at a perspective from, and this happened. So it's like, colorblind. So you're looking at it from the perspective of somebody else and their perspective. But you know, that's why you always have to go back at the end of the day, take their perspective and see how it marries up with your philosophy too, and who you are. Whether it be that we read a lot of books, whether it be what we read and our articles, whatever it be what we read, how is that matching up with what I know and what I experience? And, you know, do I have a colorblind person telling me how to match my grades? So sometimes the message gets distorted because of the messenger, but at the same time, we have to look at the message and go back and just apply it for ourselves. And that's why it's so important to know who you are, because the more we know about ourselves, we make decisions based on what we've been listening to and what we're applying. And it just feels and connects with us better.
Yeah.
But I appreciate everybody today. I hope today's lesson kind of helped and, you know, made things a little clearer. But I appreciate the input as always, because it just kind of helps the flow. And when you listen and you hear the questions, you kind of know where to pull your answer from, or where to kind of connect the dots, so to say. So I always appreciate that. If we don't have anything else, I've given. I guess I gotta given all I can today as far as moving forward. But any other questions or comments? Okay, I appreciate it. I hope everybody has a good day, and we'll reconvene tomorrow. Like I said, just think about everything we talked about today, and always go back and internalize it for yourself. And if questions come up, please bring them up, because I think it's really helping us understand the steps to this. But everybody have a good day.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Ash.
Ash, you too.